Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamata, Greece for Reason to Resist on May 20th, 2026. The past few days have been an unmitigated disaster for the Trump and Netanyahu regimes. Militarily, politically, and economically, a true disaster. Today, in the first part of our report, we'll share with you the highlights from the avalanche of bad news that befell the Trump and Netanyahu regimes. And in the second half of this report, we'll interview a member of the Iranian diaspora who now lives in Canada for the purpose of giving voice to people in the Iranian diaspora who are actually opposed to this criminal war of aggression on Iran because far more often than not, the Western corporate media only want you to hear from the few Iranians living in the West who actually support this criminal war of aggression on Iran. Now, before we get into it, I'd like to remind you that if you find this video to be informative, please like and share it. If you're not already a subscriber, please become one. Help us to expand the reach of our unapologetic resistance journalism. We aim to surpass the threshold of 200,000 subscribers before the end of the summer, which is the 2-year anniversary of the founding of Reason to Resist. And you can certainly help us to get there. We're currently over 176,000 subscribers, so our goal is eminently attainable with your assistance. And I also wanted to point out that R2R recently launched a merchandise program to help us fund our on-the-ground journalism in conflict zones. Right now, as a matter of fact, our correspondent, the fine comrade Rami Yahya, is in Iraq for the purpose of reporting on the activities of the resistance there, and will be publishing his reports in the days ahead. By purchasing R2R merchandise, or donating directly to R2R, and you can find out how to do that by looking at the description to this video. You can help us to expand the reach of our on-the-ground journalism. In that regard, I wanted to bring to your attention a post, a news item that came to our attention yesterday. A few days ago, Sky News, this was actually May 18th, posted on X a report by a correspondent of Sky News named Dominic Waghorn, an unfortunate name if ever there was one, who they claimed was the first international journalist to report from Minab, the town in the south of Iran, where the United States military carried out a heinous atrocity on the first day of this war of aggression, killing 168 school children and school teachers in the destruction of a school and a school compound with multiple Tomahawk missiles. Now, for some reason, this Sky News post claims, refers to the U.S. airstrike as an alleged airstrike. Why they say it's alleged when the U.S. military has admitted that it in fact hit the school and hasn't really explained in any meaningful way how that happened, your guess is as good as mine. It's not alleged. It actually was an airstrike on the U.S. airstrike on this school. But I also wanted to highlight for you that they claimed that Waghorn was the first international journalist to report from Minab after the atrocity was carried out. That's actually patently false, because as many of you who have been following Reason to Resist for months will know, I was on the ground at the Minab school in late March, along with my friends and comrades, Ahmad from Propaganda & Co., he's based in the United States, and Tim Anderson, the author and activist, who is based in Australia. And we published a lengthy report in which both Ahmad and Tim participated back in March. It was widely viewed, widely shared on social media. And I pointed this out to Sky News in a reply. You can see it at the bottom of this Sky News post. I informed them that we reported on this atrocity from Minab in March. We are from Canada and the United States. I said, doesn't that qualify us as international? And then I followed that up with another reply. You can see it at the top of the page, where I pointed out that the three of us were there reporting from Minab, not only a couple of months before Waghorn showed up, but we were there while the bombs, the Israeli and U.S. bombs, were still dropping on Iran, whereas he came during the ceasefire. When there were no bombs falling on Iran. And not only that, but as we reported at the time, 10 minutes after the three of us and our Iranian colleagues left the site of the atrocity, it was struck by a drone, either a U.S. or Israeli drone. 10 minutes later, which in the context of everything that was happening at the time, caused us to believe that it was possibly meant as a warning to us by the Israelis and or Americans to stop our reporting on their crimes. That too, we reported at the time. Now, in response to my having informed Sky News of these facts, Sky News, as of an hour ago, I informed them of these facts last night. As of an hour ago, they had not deleted this post, but in subsequent posts by Sky News where they refer to Waghorn's report from MENAB, they no longer claim that he was the first international journalist to go there. The main point I want to make here is that despite the fact that Reason to Resist has so few resources relative to a massive corporation like Sky News, we oftentimes are the first on the scene, and we get there before these corporate media outlets. And more often than not, they never show up at all. Not only do they not come weeks after the fact, they ignore the sites of these Western atrocities entirely. And in order for us to continue to be able to get there and to be the first on the scene and report honestly what's happening there, we need your support. And to all of those who have, the many fine people who have provided support to us, however small it may have been during our nearly 2 years of existence, we want to express our profound appreciation. Now, with that, I want to turn to the avalanche of bad news that the Trump and Netanyahu regimes have had to endure during the last few days. Let's begin with this report. The Congressional Research Service just listed the 42 U.S. aircraft lost or damaged so far during the war with Iran. 4 F-15E Strike Eagles destroyed, 1 F-35A damaged by Iranian ground fire. And this is the first time that an F-35 was struck in combat in the lengthy and checkered history of this extraordinarily expensive fighter jet. 1 A-10 destroyed, 7 KC-135 Stratotankers, 2 destroyed, 5 damaged, 1 E-3 Sentry AWACS damaged. This is an extremely expensive intelligence gathering aircraft. 2 MC-130J destroyed, 1 HH-60W helicopter damaged, 24 MQ-9 Reapers destroyed, and 1 MQ-4C Triton destroyed. That's what the U.S. government is prepared to admit thus far. And that was only during approximately 5 to 6 weeks of warfare. You can imagine if this thing went on for years, for example, as the conflicts, the wars of aggression in Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam went on. At this rate, the U.S., if it lasted for years, would suffer hundreds, if not in excess of 1,000 damaged or destroyed expensive and supposedly highly sophisticated military aircraft. One thing I want to raise here, it's not something that I've seen anybody else talk about. There's been a good deal of coverage about the losses that the United States Air Force has sustained during this war, but we haven't heard a peep about losses by the Israeli Air Force, even though we were told they are partners in crime with the United States in this war of aggression. So why is that? Well, one possible explanation is that the Israeli pilots are much better than the American pilots, but there's really no reason to believe that that's the case, because Israeli pilots, their experience is overwhelmingly in attacking countries that do not have effective air defenses or targets like those in Gaza, which has no air defenses, or South Lebanon has very slight air defenses. They have the ability to take down some drones, the Lebanese resistance, but they don't have the kind of air defense systems that are necessary to take down an advanced warplane. And they've been attacking Syria now ever since the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Syria today has no effective air defenses, and it doesn't have a military that is willing to use them, even if it did have effective air defenses. So there's no reason to believe that the Israelis would be more adept at evading the kind of sophisticated air defenses that Iran has than U.S. pilots. So I think we can flush that possible explanation down the toilet. Now, there are 2 other possible explanations. One is that the Israelis are being much less honest about their losses, than the United States is being. But while I certainly don't exclude that possibility, you still would think that if the Israeli Air Force had suffered comparable losses, there would be some video footage of this. The wreckage of aircraft or aircraft falling from the sky. In some cases, the Iranians produced video of their interceptor missiles actually striking the aircraft. So we have nothing like that with respect to the Israeli aircraft. So this leads me to the third possible explanation, which I regard as the most plausible under the circumstances, and that is that even though Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, admitted that the reason why the U.S. is fighting this war is because they knew, the Trump regime, that that Israel was going to attack Iran, and they knew that Iran would retaliate by attacking U.S. military bases. So they said, well, what the hell, we may as well attack Iran preemptively before it starts striking our military bases. And in effect, he was saying, we became involved in this war because Israel had decided it was going to attack Iran. Well, if that's what actually happened, you would expect Israel to be taking the lead in placing its military assets at risk and its military personnel at risk, or at least to be assuming as much risk as the U.S. military, and in particular its Air Force, are assuming in the bombing campaign against the country. But I suspect what's going on here is that, in fact, the Trump regime ordered its military to do all the heavy lifting, and that the Israeli military, those child murdering pilots in the Israeli military, basically took a back seat. They did participate, probably to a meaningful degree, but they really operated from a more safe distance and were less exposed in the way they handled this than the United States, because that's what the United States does. It privileges the Israeli military and the genocidal entity over the interests of its own citizens. And I would also point out that we know the United States did mount a major ground operation. Well, maybe you won't call it major, but a significant one in Esfahan, which turned out to be a complete and utter debacle. That's where a number of these aircraft were actually lost. There's no indication that the Israelis participated in that ground operation. Why not? These noble warriors from the genocidal forces of the Israeli military, these world-class soldiers, we're told, why were they not directly involved in the ground operations? Why were they not put at risk alongside American soldiers? I'll leave that to our friends in the United States to put to their elected representatives. I think it's a very good question that they should be obliged to answer. Now, at around the same time that the Congressional Research Services disclosed these significant losses, Trump took to Truth Social to explain why he had delayed, purportedly, an attack on Iran that was to begin yesterday, Tuesday, May 19th. And here is his post on Truth Social. He put this up, actually, I think in the evening or the late afternoon, Washington time, on May 18th. And he said, I've been asked by the Emir of Qatar and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and the President of the UAE to hold off on our planned military attack on the Islamic Republic of Iran, which was scheduled for tomorrow, in that serious negotiations are now taking place, and that, in their opinion, as great leaders and allies, a deal will be made, which will be very acceptable to the United States of America as well as the countries in the Middle East and beyond. This deal will include, importantly, no nuclear weapons for Iran. Well, Iran has already committed decades ago to not developing nuclear weapons, but let's put that aside. And he goes on and says, based on my respect for the above-mentioned leaders, I have instructed Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Daniel Kaine, and the U.S. military that we will not be doing the scheduled attack on Iran tomorrow, but have further instructed them to be prepared to go forward with a full large-scale assault of Iran on a moment's notice in the event that an acceptable deal is not reached. Now, this harebrained explanation for what happened yesterday didn't go down particularly well with these Gulf regimes. And you can see here that it was reported by the Wall Street Journal, no less, that officials from some of those countries said they were unaware that Donald Trump had intended to attack Iran again on May 19th, yesterday. So if they weren't even aware that he had planned to do it, obviously they wouldn't have asked him to stand down. How could they ask him to stand down about something they didn't know he was planning to do? So that turned out to be yet another public relations debacle for the Donald. Now, perhaps the Donald, and we've seen evidence of this, plenty of evidence of this during the course of this war, he was lying through his teeth for the purpose of talking down the price of oil. He wanted people in the oil markets to calm down and think that a deal was, yet again, convince them that a deal was just around the corner, which would mean the opening of the Strait of Hormuz and free passage of oil tankers and cargo ships through the strait. But that didn't seem to be particularly effective this time around. And you can see up here on the screen the price of oil. It has only gone down. I think it was up at around the Brent crude futures price was up around $1.10 or $1.11 before he made this announcement. And the last time I checked, it had gone down 2.47%. It was at almost at $109, far above the level it was at before this criminal war of aggression was launched. So it's only gone down, a couple of percentage points, despite Donald saying that not only he, but allegedly the leaders of all of these great Gulf autocracies believed that a deal was going to be made imminently. So it appears that the boy who has cried wolf has lost all credibility, even in the all too gullible oil trading markets. Now it gets worse from there, my friends. The New York Times has just released a poll showing just how spectacularly unpopular Trump's war of aggression on Iran is. And here you can see the results of that poll. This was conducted from May 11th to May 15th, so it's quite recent. Only 30% believe that launching this war on Iran was the right decision. 64%, almost two-thirds of Americans disagree. Less than one-third say it was the right decision. Almost two-thirds say it was the wrong decision. Almost nobody in the Democratic Party thinks it was the right decision. Even 22% of Republicans now say it was the wrong decision, and a little more than two-thirds say it was the right decision. Independents, you can't see it up here on the screen, overwhelmingly believe that it was the wrong decision. So it is quite clear that even though the U.S. economy has not seen anywhere near the worst effects from the prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz, Donald Trump's war on Iran is proving to be spectacularly unpopular, and that at a time when the midterm elections are rapidly approaching. Meanwhile, Trump just suffered a setback in the United States Senate as well. And this is news that was published today. The U.S. Senate advanced a resolution to curb Trump's power to wage war on Iran. This is a report in Al Jazeera. Vote to advance war powers resolution seen as a rare rebuke of the president as pressure grows to end U.S. attacks on Iran. Now, this is just advancing the resolution for further debate and consideration by the Senate. It hasn't been adopted. And even if it is adopted, it'll be an interesting question whether it actually has the force of law and whether Trump will respect it and whether the Senate will use the resolution, because just because they confer upon themselves the power, which they have under the Constitution, not only the power but the obligation to decide when and under what circumstances the U.S. goes to war, they may not use that power themselves. But this is at least a step in the right direction. It is more consistent with the U.S. Constitution than the behavior up until now of the U.S. Senate, and it does have the potential to pose a serious problem for Trump's freedom of action when it comes to Iran. So how did Donald Trump respond to this news? Well, with the predictable bombast.
With Iran, and then you have the Democrats, I call them the Democrats, putting in a bill that Trump should immediately stop. You know how it is to negotiate with a country where you're meeting them badly, they come to the table, they're begging to make a deal, because they're begging to make a deal. I hope we don't have to do the war, but we may have to give them another big hit. We may have to give them another big hit. I'm not sure yet. You'll know very soon. But how do you feel when you're negotiating, you're winning every point, and they say, but in Washington, they want to stop you from negotiating. They want to stop you, and it's only political. It's the Democrats. They're dumb. It's a new name. It's a very accurate name. So I'm in the middle of a negotiation. I'm saying you cannot have a nuclear weapon, and it comes over the wire that the Democrats want to stop Trump from further negotiations. They want to stop Trump from, if he has to, giving them another slap. They want to have a nuclear weapon to blow up the Middle East and to blow up, frankly, the world. It's not going to happen.
This infant is so obsessed with his ballroom that he feels the need to do these interviews about matters of extraordinary importance right at the edge of the construction site, where he has to shout in order to be heard by the reporters. And by the way, it is absolutely false that this resolution would prevent him from negotiating. This has nothing to do with negotiating. This has to do with launching a war. And it's not only, as I said, the right of the U.S. Congress to decide when the country goes to war. It is the obligation of it to make that decision, that portentous decision. And of course, you heard him say throughout this tirade that he was potentially going to slap Iran here and slap Iran there. Well, if that was intended to, up the ante and place additional pressure on Iran, it spectacularly failed by all indications. I put up on the screen here the latest report from the Strait of Hormuz live tracker. This is as of about an hour ago. So I would say that's about 5 p.m. Athens time, 10 a.m. New York time. You can see it reports that during the last 24 hours, 0 vessels passed through the Strait of Hormuz. Last time, when I checked this last night, it also said that 0 vessels had passed through the Strait of Hormuz. So it appears that during the past 48 hours or so, there has been no commercial traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, which is actually significantly less than the average level of commercial traffic we've seen during the war. Most days, some vessels do get through. And there have been a number of days where more than 10 got through. It has not been often that you've seen 2 straight days go by with no commercial vessels going through. So all of this, bombast from Donald Trump doesn't appear to be having any intimidation effect on the Iranian leadership. With each passing day of delay, the economic situation is only becoming more and more dire. The U.S. government is not working towards a more advantageous position with each passing day. Its negotiating position actually becomes weaker because pressure on the global economy, and particularly the U.S. economy, increases. But there are other downsides to delay for the United States government, and particularly the military, and that is that the weather in the Persian Gulf is getting hotter by the day. It's only mid-May, as a matter of fact, and already there is an extreme heat warning in and around the Strait of Hormuz. This is the report just as of an hour or so ago for the weather in Abu Dhabi, in the United Arab Emirates, and you will see that at 6 p.m. The temperature is expected to be 37 degrees Celsius, and at the very bottom you can see excessive heat warning, severe heat is expected in this area. That's in mid-May, so you can only imagine what the heat is going to be in July and August, which are just around the corner. Now think about what it's like if I've not served in the military, but even if you haven't, just try to imagine wearing combat fatigues and carrying all of that heavy equipment that you have to carry when you're in war, doing the kind of strenuous activities that soldiers, even soldiers who are just involved in loading bombs onto warplanes, or repairing these things, filling them up with fuel, moving them in and out of hangars, doing that when the temperature is 40, 45 degrees Celsius, sometimes approaching 50 degrees Celsius. And that's the kind of temperatures you get in the Persian Gulf in the summer, is extraordinarily taxing and downright dangerous to your health. So the situation, again, is becoming increasingly difficult for both the United States economy and the United States military with each passing day. So with that, let's turn now to the situation in the genocidal Israeli entity, which is arguably worse and truly catastrophic. On Saturday night, there was a massive, mysterious explosion at a missile factory in Israel, and I'm going to show you a video that was shot by a bystander.
What the fuck? What the fuck?
מה זה?
יש שם בסיס צבאי באמא שלי.
יו! מה זה?
What the fuck indeed. If you just take a look at here, look at the size of that mushroom cloud towering above the factory. And you can see there are a lot of flames. Maybe it's hard to say because of the distance, but the flames are shooting up 10, 15, 20 meters. And that mushroom cloud seems to be, more than 50 meters tall, possibly more than 100 meters tall. This was a truly gigantic explosion. And it happened at a factory owned by a company called Tomer, which is owned by the genocidal Israeli state. Tomer develops engines for rockets and missiles, including the Arrow air defense system. This is purportedly the premier air defense system that Israel has, although I think it might be based more or less on the Patriot, the U.S. Patriot air defense system, which is known to be quite deficient in many respects. But whatever the case may be, whatever the quality of the Arrow air defense system is, the fact is that Israel is already dangerously low on missile interceptors. And the last thing it needs is a catastrophic event at a factory that produces missile interceptors, especially when it claims to be on the verge of relaunching its war of aggression on Iran. Tomer, the company, claimed that the blast was, quote, a pre-planned experiment that was carried out according to plan. However, and as the Times of Israel noted in an article on that same day, residents in the area said they had no advance notice. And furthermore, why would they carry out a massive pre-planned explosion late on a Saturday night? Wouldn't you give the residents notice and do it during the daytime when people would not be sleeping and shocked in the middle of their sleep to discover this gigantic mushroom cloud rising on the horizon? When you're dealing with a country that has been as traumatized by the war as I'm sure many people in Israel have, it doesn't make a lot of sense that you would carry out a, quote, pre-planned explosion of such a gigantic nature without giving the local residents any kind of advance warning at all. Now, on top of that, another Israeli military base mysteriously went up in flames, or at least part of it did.
What the fuck?
It's interesting how, whenever Israelis see their military assets going up in smoke, they like to say, what the fuck? That's not going to save you, I can assure you, Mr. and Miss Colonist. In any case, the reason we were given for this particular fire, and according to the Israelis, there were no injuries as a result of it, is that it was some kind of an electrical malfunction. It seems like we're hearing that kind of excuse a lot nowadays when there is a serious technical problem, operational problem on some major military asset. For example, we were told that, the crown jewel of the U.S. Navy, the USS Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, needed to be taken out of action for a significant period of time because of a laundry room fire. A laundry room fire which apparently took many hours for them to put out. And we've heard similar things about toilets clogging up on the Gerald Ford, and I could go on and on. Whether this is accidental, this fire event at this was the Tzai Elam base in southern Israel, or whether it was a result of sabotage. The fact of the matter is it's more bad news for the Israeli military. But it gets worse than that. The Lebanese resistance has published a video showing that it has taken out yet another Iron Dome missile defense battery using a cheap resistance drone. In addition, the Israeli media reported on Saturday night that 4 IDF troops were wounded, 1 severely by a roadside bomb in South Lebanon. And the subheading here in this Times of Israel article is, amid growing public anger over Hezbollah drone toll, Netanyahu claims he warned of the danger 6 years ago, but doesn't say why it wasn't addressed. It's amazing that Israelis continue to put their confidence in this sadistic war criminal. This is just one of numerous reports over the past few days. And notice this wasn't, by the way, a drone strike. This was a roadside bomb, which shows that the resistance is using a variety of tactics to inflict casualties on the Israelis. They also, the other day, killed an Israeli soldier using mortar fire. And of course, they have missiles, which they will occasionally highlight in videos they publish on resistance channels. And there was also this report published yesterday by, I believe this was the Jerusalem Post. At least 2 people were lightly wounded in northern occupied Palestine following a drone explosion. And the key point here is that this happened, this strike occurred without there being any sirens, any air defense sirens going off. Now, if you follow the Israeli media closely, you'll know that there's tremendous displeasure in the northern colonies with the conditions there and the catastrophic failure of the Israeli military to prevent attacks by the resistance on the northern colonies. And when these strikes happen and they manage to inflict damage without the sirens going off, this will only inflict considerably more stress upon the local population, those who have chosen to remain, and not many of them have. And finally, before we turn to our guest, I just want to highlight the daily report of the Lebanese resistance published today. This relates to its military operations conducted yesterday. It publishes on resistance channels a summary of its daily military operations every morning. And here you'll see that they conducted 26 military operations yesterday. And this is consistent with the number of military operations they were conducting during the height of the war from October 2023 to November 2024, when this fraudulent ceasefire went into effect in Lebanon. So it's quite clear that although it was recently announced by Trump that there had been an extension of the ceasefire in Lebanon, that this is nothing but a farce. The hostilities are as intense as they ever have been. Israel continues to slaughter huge numbers of Lebanese civilians. It took out an entire family, including several children, just within the past 48 hours. And so the fact that the media, anybody within the media, continues to lend credence to the claim that there's a ceasefire in effect in Lebanon is quite frankly a disgrace. So with that, let's now turn to our guest. And,
good morning or good evening.
Good morning to you, Goli. You are in Western Canada. Thank you so much for joining us today. I just want to clarify for our audience, and if you want to elaborate, Goli, you've asked me not to disclose your full identity. And my understanding is, and I completely get it because I've seen how what's the word I'm looking for? Dangerous, maybe that's the right word. It is. Especially when you're a member of the Iranian diaspora, to criticize what is being done to Iran by the United States and Israel with the support of pretty much all Western governments. So I'm going to, obviously we will respect that, and we'll only refer to you as Goli during the course of this interview. So with that, thank you again for joining us.
And thank you so much, Dimitri, for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show. I've been following you for over a year now. I love your channels. And I love your concept of resistance, and the fact that you were in Iran recently was so admirable. So thank you for supporting Iran and Palestine.
My pleasure. It's the least I can do. So I'd like to start, Goli, with why don't you tell us about your background? And particularly, I understand that you actually lived through the Iran-Iraq war, or part of it, when you were young. Could you tell us about that, and just tell us more generally about your background?
Absolutely. So I was born in Tehran, And I lived in Iran till the age of 14. So I lived through the whole entire 8-year war with that Iraq's the aggressive war on Iraq that was fully backed by the United States from 1980 to 88. I lived through that war. I have very vivid memories of what life was like, the collective society, and so on. I left Iran at the age of 14. I immigrated to Spain. I did most of my middle school and high school in Spain. Fast forward to Canada. I pretty much had all my rest of my secondary years and university and my master's years in Vancouver. But I've been living abroad in different countries all over the world, total of 8 countries. And I've just been back in Canada recently for the time being. Yeah, so I'm so happy to be able to share my experiences as an Iranian who has been away from Iran for a lot of decades. I do plan to be in Iran very hopefully at the end of June. I plan to be there for at least a month and a half, and I want to do some help as much as I can in different ways and channels, and maybe that will come up during the rest of our interview.
And just so you say you were there when during the war. You have vivid memories. Do you have family in Iran today?
I have lots of family, particularly from my father's side. As you probably have encountered, a lot of Iranians, we have families scattered out throughout the world in diaspora, but I still
Mhm.
have a significant number of aunts and uncles and cousins that are there that, yeah, so they're there now, and they're sort of just dealing with the day-to-day situation. Absolutely.
And so, based on what you've heard, by the way, when was the last time you were actually in Iran?
It was about 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yes.
So, based on what you're hearing from your family and friends in Iran today, do you think the conditions in the country are as bad as they were during the worst part of the Iran-Iraq war? Do you think they're not as bad? Do you think they're worse? What's your sense?
I think that's a very interesting question because we were at a very different era at that time. I think also with the presence of social media today, we are living in a very different world, the way we deliver our news from inside Iran and outside. I do remember as a child living through that war that everyone was basically on food rations or coupons. There was a huge shortage of food. I remember that very vividly. No matter what social class you were from, we were given coupons. So there was a huge shortage of food. From what I understand now, and I've been in close contact with a lot of people in Iran right now, despite what's happened since the January protests and what happened, there is, as you probably have known too, because you were in Iran yourself, economy is really bad. A lot of people have lost their jobs. I just spoke to a friend yesterday. She's a tour guide and she's lost her job. So that we cannot ignore that. But at the same time, one thing that I can say to you that is almost identical between the 1980-88 war and now is the unity of people. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that unity and camaraderie of people ends up in people being really kind and sharing what they have in terms of groceries or in terms of a store owner saying, well, if you can't pay it now, pay it after the war. So because of that community building and sense of connection and unity, sometimes the lack of shortages of different things in the day-to-day life might make it easier, if you will. I'm
Right.
not there at the moment, so I don't have the experience of day-to-day. I do know that the port, well, I think over 3 million people, if I'm not mistaken, have been displaced since the start of this war. So I definitely can say, and you probably know better than, yeah, there are huge problems of homelessness, of poverty, and economy. But in terms of the parallels between the two wars, I think I was listening to an Iranian political analyst last week, and he said something very beautiful. He said they're always asked what the biggest point was for Iran during this war. And as we know, Iran has the upper hand right now. But he said something that got me really thinking. He said the biggest earning for us Iranians right now is our unity. Before the Strait of Hormuz and before anything else, it's that unity that was dormant. It was never dormant. We had it in the Iran-Iraq war. During that war, I think I can say that we were like a set of chains. We all united, and we did not have the technology. We did not have the military. We were just fresh out of a young revolution, if you remember, 1979. And Saddam declared a war. And the war went on for 8 years, and we did not lose an inch. And we did not even have the missile capabilities and what we have today. So I hope that sort of brings a parallel to back to your question.
Yeah, when I was there, now I was there in late March, Goli. So the situation obviously may be considerably worse now, especially since this blockade went into effect. When I was there was no blockade. But I actually didn't see, and I was in 7 cities in 11 days. I actually didn't see any homelessness, and I didn't see any homelessness when I was in Tehran in May of last year either. As far as I could tell, again, this is in March. People weren't having to use coupons to buy food. The grocery stores seemed to be, reasonably stocked shelves in the grocery stores, and obviously people who had lost their jobs and so forth were struggling to make ends meet and to buy groceries. But the food was available, and you didn't require coupons to buy it. So, is it your understanding that that's changed since then, or you're still not unsure exactly how what those conditions are on the ground?
Yeah, what you have just described is what I've heard over and over from, because I do follow on a regular day. I watch different sources of media from inside and outside Iran, and I try to have a balanced view of what's happening. And what you've described is what I also hear from a lot of reliable sources, from the Iranian sources, that there is war. We were bombed, and yet there doesn't seem to be any shortage of any kind in most places. Places are well stocked. Bakeries have bread. There's things. Now prices are really high right now, as is everywhere. What I was just thinking about, the way what you were describing, is our martyred leader Khamenei. One thing that he stressed for the last 47 years was the importance of self-reliance on us Iranians. As you remember, the previous, the Shah regime was heavily basically relied on United States and Great Britain. We did not really have our own independent autonomy based on our petroleum and economy. So one thing that I do really love and admire, and I get a lot of lashback on that, but it doesn't matter, is that the current government, especially with the focus of Khamenei, the martyred Khamenei, it's really important for us to build our own economy and growth from within. So I'm just thinking about that, because we had coupons and shortage of food during the Iran-Iraq war, and now it's not the same anymore, right? You were there for 11 days and you did not see that. Why is that? I think it's because of, over the years, as a country that was heavily sanctioned, this determination. And when our doors are closed, you have to look within to find a solution. And I think a lot of countries like Iran and Cuba and so on, because of these heavily sanctions from the Western powers, inevitably become very self-efficient. And I wonder if that's one of the factors of what you and I are noticing about what's happening on the day-to-day needs.
Do you describe yourself more as a secular individual or as a religious individual?
That's a great question, and I've thought about that over the years. I think today, as the person that I am today, that was very different maybe from a decade ago, I would say much more religious. And I say that, okay, obviously I'm not covering my hair, and I may not look like the typical, whatever that means, religious type, but I very strongly believe in the Shia Muslim values. And I think that and again, a lot of people disagree on this, but I do think that one of the biggest reasons for our strength and resistance during this really this unrest and this war is those principles and values that are connected to Shia Islam. A lot of people don't understand the significance of martyrdom, or that is based on Imam Hussein, the son of Imam Ali, and the sacrifice that a leader needs to make for the better of their country. So I would say I'm much more gravitated towards the religious, spiritual side. I never felt completely comfortable with the term secular, whatever that means, because for me personally, as a non-Western person, it also has a lot of negative connotations when it's imposed on a non-Western nation. But again, that's just my personal opinion. I've never felt completely comfortable with countries that proudly say we need to become secular. What does that even mean? Does it mean giving up your values and your traditions? So I hope that sort of gives you an idea of where my values rest.
Yes. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the government of Iran. You know, we touched on the question of homelessness and poverty a few minutes ago. And when we in the West talk about the government of Iran, the whole discussion seems to be about religious freedom and freedom of speech. There's a lot of other things that don't ever get talked about. And even on the question of religious freedom, what I saw when I was in Iran, of course, it is a religiously Shia Muslim conservative government. That's very true. I think it can be fairly described as a theocracy. But I also saw that people who are not Shia Muslims were free to practice their religion, including Jewish persons. And I saw no evidence. I visited a synagogue when I was there. By the way, you may know this. The Israeli military destroyed that synagogue, claiming it was an accident. Although the Jews who worshiped there, some of them publicly stated that they thought that they were being punished because they were anti-Zionist, that the Israelis had punished them. But in any case, what I saw was people who are not Shia Muslim were free to practice their religion. And although I was told over and over again that if you walked in the streets of Iran and you're a woman and you were not wearing a hijab, you would be dealt with severely. In every city I went to, I saw hundreds of women walking the streets without a hijab and nobody was bothering them. But that's not what I want to talk about right now, because I've covered that a lot of my program. What I want to talk about is the socioeconomic aspects of this government. Can you talk to us a little bit about how they, I don't know if it would make it even any sense for us to talk about it in terms of socialism, but if we look at socioeconomic policy on a spectrum, and at one end you have socialism, and at the other end you have free market liberalism, just unbridled, with no government regulation, and everything is determined by the markets and so forth. Where do you think the policies of the Iranian government fall on that spectrum? Would you say they tend more towards social democracy, socialism, or do they tend more towards free market capitalism?
That's a great question. I think right now, and I don't know if this sort of should connect to your question. One of the biggest challenge that, in my view, and is we are facing from within our government, which the West, as you know, always refers to it as the regime. Funnily, that's part of the 47-year-old propaganda. It's the regime. It's a government. It's a legitimate government. I don't care what people say. They might hate it, but whatever. Right now, we have two big, very powerful parties or forces, if you will. There's the oligarchy, and then there's the neoliberal, those in power. And those two forces are what have created a lot of inconsistencies and infiltration of, if you will, treason or unrest within the country, especially going back to the previous president Rouhani. That was Raisi. Raisi was assassinated. Previous to that, we had Rouhani and Javad Zarif. If you remember, he was the foreign minister during the time of Obama. It was those two, it was Rouhani and Zarif that actually were part of this oligarch neoliberal forces that sort of took Iran to a very negative direction with the JCPOA of 2015 that was signed by Obama, if you remember, and then Donald Trump tore it. But they sort of wanted to give up our enriched uranium and our missile capabilities, and they wanted to have a negotiation with the United States. So these, I don't know if that makes sort of ties in with your question, but right now we have, and I don't, so going back to your question, is it more of a socialist force rather than capital? I think it's a combination, because we have so many different waves going against the main principles of the supreme leader and the principles of the Islamic Republic, that the Islamic Republic is not what the Islamic Republic was 47 years ago. It's changed. And I do find, based on what I've described, there is so much corruption and infiltration of people that do want to submit to the West in one way or the other, that I think this is one of the biggest, this is a big weakness that the government really needs to work on. The negotiations keep happening. We don't know why. The term negotiation right now has a very scary connotation for us Iranians, because nothing good came out of it, only assassinations. So I hope I sort of answered your question.
Yes.
It's hard to know which side we're on. I think it's right now it's a mixed bag.
So let's talk, I can simplify it. Let's talk about some specific issues. Is healthcare in Iran free?
You know what? I don't know the full answer to that. I don't think it's completely free for everybody. I don't know, actually. I should know. I think in a lot of companies or workplaces, you do need to buy and have insurance. I don't think it's completely free.
So yeah, that by the way, that's common in the West too, that you have to buy some sort of supplemental insurance.
Yes.
But there's, you understand that it is least, is it your understanding that it's at least state subsidized to a large degree?
Definitely.
Healthcare?
Yes.
Okay. What about higher education? Do you know higher education? Do you see the kind of tuition fees that we see in the West, where you have to pay like $15,000 in tuition?
Not nearly. Of course, as you know, there are a lot of privatized universities and schools where they're quite expensive, but state universities, not nearly. I went to UBC in Vancouver, and for years I was in debt for my student loans. So the West, I often tell my family and friends, we pay way more, I think, in the West for healthcare and academics and schooling than even in countries like Iran. And I lived in Turkey for 10 years. It's completely, you get much more services for the tax you pay and for what you give back, in my opinion. This is my own living experience.
In Iran,
as you probably are aware, and a lot of people don't know, 65% of university students in Iran are female, whereas in the United States is below 50. So that also tells you about the role of women.
Yeah. Yes, I continuously, in fact, I just got interviewed by Iranian television yesterday, and both the producer and the interviewer were women. So, and that's been my experience in dealing with the Iranian media. And when you deal with, I don't want to offend anybody here, but when you see women in the corporate media here, they don't really sound like journalists. They kind of look like models, and there was a time when, the same is true of men, by the way, right? These really handsome, but there was a time when people didn't need to look like supermodels in the corporate media in the West in order to be respected journalists. But now it seems like that's a job qualification. In Iran, the many journalists I've dealt with there kind of reminding me of the way journalists were back when I was a kid in North America, which were much more serious journalists. In any case, you said something a moment ago which struck me as interesting, and you said that Raisi was assassinated. Now, the narrative is that in the West, and it was, as far as I can recall, one that the Iranian government more or less adopted, was that there was an accident, and he was in a helicopter, and the helicopter crashed due to a technical difficulty. I will tell you, Goli, that within, I think, 48 hours of that accident happening. I did a report on this program, which I said, I think he was assassinated by the Americans and or the Israelis. And you're the first person I've actually spoken to in the Iranian community about this issue. You don't seem to have any question in your mind that he was actually assassinated. Is that a widespread view amongst your friends in the Iranian community?
Sadly, no. They exactly what you said. That people, without a question, it was a plane crash. And in fact, I remember very vividly when that occurred. People were celebrating. How sad is people were celebrating that this criminal that was they had a nickname for him, the Butcher of Tehran, that this criminal had been killed and gone to hell, and the foreign minister was also with him. He was also assassinated. I don't have without a shadow of a doubt that this was very likely an Israeli job. So I love that you covered it when it happened. But yeah, I would say, again, I'm generalizing, but based on good reason. I would say the majority of Iranians in diaspora, without a question, will say that it was an accident and they were very pleased with it.
Mm-hmm. The majority of the Iranians in the diaspora would say that.
If not all, I swear, if not all, the majority. Yes.
Really? So,
this might bring up the whole monarchist topic soon, but yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That's what I want to talk to you about next. So, I've had two very dramatically different experiences of the Iranian diaspora in Canada.
Okay.
The first time I interacted, I began to actually interact with significant numbers of people in the Iranian diaspora, is when people from the Iranian-Canadian Congress contacted me. They were familiar with my work and my opposition to imperialism, and they were just reaching out to me to sort of establish a relationship and begin a dialogue. And so I got to know people in the Iranian-Canadian Congress, and then they began to have some legal issues with people in the diaspora who were, monarchists. And so I kind of became involved in that on a pro bono basis. Then I ran to be the leader of the Green Party of Canada in 2020, and I had an event out in Vancouver with members of the Iranian diaspora. Dozens of them showed up to that event. Then I had another event in Montreal where I live, where dozens of them showed up. And almost all of these people that I interacted with, almost all of them were opposed to the sanctions. They had I would put it as a measured view about the government of Iran. They weren't, fanatically hateful towards the government of Iran. They felt that Canada should have diplomatic relations with the government of Iran. And so they had no love whatsoever for the Shah, the Shah's son, Trump, Netanyahu, Biden, or any of them. So then came the war. Okay. This war I'm talking about. And then in the course of the war, before I came to Greece, before I went to Iran, I left for Iran in mid-March.
Mm-hmm.
I attended 3 protests in favor of the war, organized by people in the Iranian diaspora. This would have been in February and March. One in Ottawa, one in Montreal, and one in Toronto. And the experience I had there was radically different. It was radically different. I mean, people were out in the streets, holding up signs of Trump, holding up the Israeli flag, holding up pictures of the Shah, pictures of the son, chanting, the name of Pahlavi, openly glorifying him. I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked when I saw this, and it was so different from the experience I'd had. So I've had these two diametrically opposed experiences, and I've not been able to figure out which one of these ways of thinking is dominant within the Iranian diaspora. Okay, I couldn't figure out whether the majority of people in the Iranian diaspora are pro-Shah or whether they are people like you, who have a very measured and sort of respectful view of the government. You just said something, however, which you seem to have a very firm view about this. You seem to be convinced that the vast majority are pro-Shah. Is that your view, and why do you have that view?
And just to add another complicated layer to what, because you've described different ways you've seen it, and I've recently noticed even within that something. Okay, so I don't know if the reason I say the majority is also because I know that there are people like me or people that also resent Pahlavi, right? But I do think that the problem is that many of those Iranians are really afraid to speak up. So many of them would not be doing what I'm doing today and showing their face. They are extremely scared. And there's a reason I'm bringing this up. They're often they're threatened. They get hate mail. I get it all the time. They're threatened. As you know, we had a case of a murder here in Vancouver. Dr. Masood Masjoudi was murdered by two residents, Iranians here. So a lot of them are afraid to speak. So when I say the majority, I'm also aware that there is a small percentage of Iranians in diaspora who are not those Zionist, monarchist, Pahlavi supporters. Now, within even that group, I've noticed something that also brings a different layer to it. I've noticed when I look at different comments on social media that a lot of Iranians resent and loathe Pahlavi, like they cannot stand him. But at the same time, they are also very anti-government. They are very anti-communism. They are very anti-leftist, whatever the term leftist mean. I find that such a broad term. So I've noticed recently that a lot of anti-Pahlavi Iranians are completely welcoming the balkanization of Iran, in fact. You know what I mean? For Iran to be taken into pieces like former Yugoslavia. A lot of those also do have Kurdish backgrounds. As you know, here in diaspora, there's a lot of Iranian Kurds who for years have wanted their independence. And as you recall, Donald Trump and the Zionist regime and the American regime really wanted to activate these Kurdish forces from within Iran during the January protests. The plan was that they would get those Mossad agents on the streets that murdered thousands of people, and then they would bring in all these militia and terrorist groups. Kurds were part of them, not all. So I'm finding that, yeah, maybe I cannot say that all Iranians in diaspora are pro-Pahlavi. I think a lot of them are, though. I safely say from my own experience and my friends that majority are Pahlavi supporters and Israel supporters. But it's very interesting what you said. I had never even heard about that. That's a very different dichotomy that you've described, that
Yeah.
some of them were not gravitating towards that either.
Yeah.
But I think in among all of this, a lot of people, either like me or similar people to my view, are getting either hidden or lost because we're not hearing everyone's voices right now.
Yeah, I should have added that. I completely agree with your observation. The people who are opposed to the Shah, opposed to Israel and Trump, and have a sympathetic or at least a measured view of the current Iranian government, they are very concerned about speaking out. You're an exception. Most of them, because they tell me this. And I can't tell you how many people I've had coming to me because I'm a lawyer, and I've had so many people in the Iranian diaspora come to me in the last 2 months and say, I feel threatened, I can't speak out, they're trying to take my job away from me, can you help me? I need a lawyer, over and over and over again. And people telling me in the Iranian diaspora that they're afraid to speak out. And I myself have been subjected to numerous death threats, numerous. Sometimes people even threaten me with death. They're not doing it under a fake name. I mean, it's wild. So this leads me to my next question, Goli. What are those people thinking? I mean, I just don't understand how
You know
anybody.
what?
You don't like the government. Okay, you don't like the government. Like, how could you possibly believe that Trump and Netanyahu are interested in the well-being of the Iranian people?
This is a question that has been, we Iranians have been talking about this for months now. I'll just add one other point, and then I can explain what I think is happening. There's a few factors. During the 12-day war, if you recall, in June of 2025, I was just I started noticing something last month. During that time, which was less than a year ago, these monarchist Zionist force was not nearly as evident. In fact, during the 12-day war, a lot of my own relatives and friends on my social media pages who are no longer there were not attacking me, were not threatening me, they were not insulting me. Actually, in fact, everybody was really kind and nice. And if I posted something about the autonomy of Iran, they were very supportive. So during that 12-day war, these people were not, it wasn't like this. Now, going back to your other question, and I often say in a very sarcastic way, I say these people are a perfect case study for doctors and neurologists, for brain surgeons. If they could dissect their brain and see what's happened to their brain, which I really think that, and again, this sounds really mean, but it's all about like brain, the death of the brain. And I think so there's different factors involved here. If you probably know, as a journalist and a lawyer, there are over 300 Persian speaking news outlets in the West. Over 300 Persian speaking news outlets in the West. The most famous one, as you know, is Iran International. It's funded by Saudi Arabia, and it's pretty much Israel International. Like, it's the most anti-Iranian news channel in Persian. These people that you've come across with, the ones that threaten you and threaten me, for 47 years, they're getting their news from this channel. Next to that is Persian BBC. It's UK based, and then you have Voice of America. So these are like the three top, and then there's many other ones, mostly in the United States and Great Britain. I think one of the biggest reasons why these people are the way they are is, you know, I've done a lot of webinars on impact of brainwashing. And often people think that it's a cliche, but brainwashing is a real thing. When
Oh, yeah.
this is, yeah. So they're getting their news from news that is dictated by Israel. I mean, this is a fact. I'm not making this up. The second thing is, if you probably know about the history of the Pahlavi dynasty, the patriarch of Pahlavi dynasty, Reza Shah, the grandfather of the current ketchup clown prince, Reza Shah was pretty much came to power by the British in the early 1920s. He was a soldier. He was a Cossack soldier. And the British pretty much dictated to him what he needs to do to reform Iran. So, of course, I don't deny the fact that he did a lot of good things for Iran. He built the first railroad in Iran. He created and built universities. So we're not denying that. But what with the British being behind him, the whole Pahlavi dynasty that these people support and adore is deeply connected to British colonialism and white supremacist idea. During the time of Reza Shah in the 1920s, one of the biggest things that he did, and he literally did this very aggressively, and my grandmother remembered this, they went by force and they removed by force women's hijabs on the streets. So this was part of the secularization of Iran, similar to Ataturk's Turkey, who was a contemporary of him in the early 1920s. So this was all connected to this Orientalist idea that Iran is savage and primitive. And I'm bringing this up because a lot of the roots and causes of these people's anti-Muslim ideas and anti-Arab ideas and very racist ideas towards Afghans, towards Arabs, or anyone that doesn't support them. And you probably know this, they really think that they are white. These Pahlavi supporters think that they are this white European nation that was conquered by Islam and it needed to be rescued by the West. So there's a lot behind why these people act so insanely that they do. It's all connected to this I call them colonial informants for the United States and Israel. So you probably have come across the things that I'm describing to you. And a lot of it is also, sadly, that they don't know their own history. We have a
Yeah.
very tumultuous history that goes centuries back. they don't really read. These people, and sadly, a lot of these people are educated people. There's a lot of doctors and engineers and a lot of people in there, but it doesn't mean that they're fully informed. And I think the last thing that I would say is their egos. The ego is a powerful thing. They are so comfortable with this narrative and this nostalgia and romanticizing this Pahlavi era that was extremely corrupt. It was so corrupt. We had our illiteracy and poverty rates were way higher back then if you compare it to now. Of course, time has passed, but I'm going to say something very taboo, but I'm going to say it. I often say the Pahlavi dynasty. Every member of the Pahlavi dynasty lived the life of the lifestyle of the Epstein class. And I can back that up with facts and evidence, from starting from the patriarch down to the man right now, the clown prince. So there's a lot of things involved here. It doesn't justify what they're doing, but it's a very sad state. And I honestly don't think that there's any hope for them, because I really do think that they are brain dead due to everything that I've described.
Yeah, support for Israel, the best way I can sum it up is it's a mental illness, frankly. And so I would say exactly the same thing about support for Donald Trump. It's a mental illness. In any case, Goli, it's not taboo to say what you said on this program. We welcome diversity of opinion, and I thank you very much for your candid remarks and frankly, in this very dangerous environment, having the courage to express the opinions you've expressed, because it is a very perilous environment for people who hold your views in the West, not just in Canada. So again, thank you very much for joining us. I hope we can have you back on the program one day as these dramatic events unfold in Iran.
I hope so too. I'll be happy to come back anytime. And I really loved your questions and enjoyed my time. Thank you so much.